Welcome to Paddy Scally's. Thank you for coming.
Good to see you.
We're in this gorgeous vibey pub. We're surrounded by the signatories of the Proclamation of Independence. Our friend Keith McGovern designed this pub. It was his brainchild. He decided that there was some people that didn't want to be in a big busy pub. They'd like to be in an old, more traditional pub. And it was all about the pint. As you can see, there are 4 Guinness taps.
Yeah. Well, in fairness to Charlie Chalk, he would be open-minded enough to take something like this and incorporate it into his enterprise.
Yeah, and there's live music here in the evenings, like at the weekend and stuff. Our other friend Richie plays here all the time, doesn't he? Yeah. So it's a nice vibey place to shoot this, and the lights are lovely.
Yeah, it's very relaxing.
It is lovely. So we're not doing necessarily a podcast vibe. We're doing more of a chat vibe. Okay. So I'm not going to be like firing questions at you and expecting you to come back to me with these kind of formulated responses. So we'll start off with an easy one. Who is AJ Noonan?
Well, that's a good question. I suppose I'm a middle-aged orphan, as in from January this year, I lost my mother. Oh. So that's a new phase of my life. I was born in Mayo. I'm in Dublin almost 40 years. Went to the College of Commerce, had 5 glorious years and was awful lucky to get a diploma in anything. And then I'm self-employed for over 30 years, initially in recruitment and subsequently in the property industry. And I'm a former chair of the Small Farms Association, and I sit on the board of Ireland's promotional bank, which is the SBCI. I'm married with children who are adults who still live at home, and I play a lot of golf. I drink socially, I think. Is that how you described it earlier?
Drink.
I do a lot of work drinking. I support Mayo, fanatical Mayo. Again, here we go.
A fanatical Mayo advocate in all things.
Man City for the Champions League could be a really interesting few weeks ahead, and that's me in a nutshell.
So that's AJ. That's AJ. Like, that's kind of nearly what I'd see on your LinkedIn. But who is AJ Noonan?
Well, I think
what's your purpose in life?
What is my purpose in life? Well, I used to think for a lot of my life that it was about making money. But unfortunately, we had a stillborn daughter in 1998, and I stopped thinking as much about making money then. I still think a lot about making money though. I think my purpose is to definitely leave some sort of a legacy after me for my children and maybe my grandchildren to celebrate. I don't want to just be a blip.
What do you think the legacy could be?
Well, one would hope that some of the work we've done in property, that at least we're leaving something after us. I think if we could, certainly my work in the SFA, I really enjoyed, and the work on the SBCI, I really enjoy, in terms of trying to make it easier to do business in Ireland in what is a very, very challenging environment to run a business, because business people and wealth creators in general are frowned upon by a large segment of the Irish community.
What are the barriers to doing business in Ireland as you see them?
Bureaucracy, flip-flopping on decisions, lack of leadership within the body politic, lack of finance, cost of finance, fear, all of the above.
Why do you think people are afraid? Do you think Irish people, there's a kind of a cultural conditioning there from our mammies telling us get a job in the civil service, get a job in the bank?
Absolutely.
That we're nearly afraid to take the risk.
It's not necessarily even our mammies' generation. I see it in this generation of, and it's not necessarily fear. It's also wanting people to be happy, and the objective being that if you're taking risk and you're out there in the business arena, that you're in charge, you could be in trouble. Something will happen. Something will go wrong, and something will go wrong, and something will go wrong working as a teacher, and something will go wrong working in all those jobs as well.
So when we're talking about this cultural imperative, what does that mean in terms of doing business?
Well, first and foremost, to take a risk, to go out on your own in business, is a very courageous thing to do for anybody. So let's not say that it's easy, and it's not easy. And surviving in business is very challenging for anybody who's been successful in business. You know, and the vast majority of businesses fail. So the fear of failure is always going to be there. But also, you must embrace it and say, look, for every failure, there's going to be a success. And for how often you fail, sounds like it's an analogy, you fail better. Of course you fail better.
That was what Sam Beckett said.
You have to, but you can't keep making the same stupid mistake. You have to learn from them. And I suppose looking back, I mean, I'm 33 years at it. It took me a few goes to learn from the same mistake.
You don't learn until it really hurts you.
Yeah, absolutely.
I wish I could learn from other people's mistakes.
Well, that would
I
be
wish
the
I could be
absolute.
that clever.
And if I had to reinvent, I would have stayed employed longer. I set up my first business when I was 24. That wasn't a very bright thing to do. I should have stayed working for someone else and make all the mistakes on their time and money for a few years. But unfortunately, I was probably unemployable. So it didn't matter. I was fired.
You didn't fit into the template.
No, I was fired out of most jobs I was in. For not insubordination, but just lack of interest in making money for someone else.
Also, you probably looked like you were having way too much fun, and you probably looked like you were doing nothing, when in actual fact you were probably getting the work done, but you made it look easy.
I'd say now you're probably right in your first assertion. I was doing very little for someone else. No, that's not true. That's too harsh, but not far off the mark.
No, I definitely think there's a bit of that. Like I've experienced that through my whole life, you know, working in jobs for other people where you're kind of, you know me, I'd be jumping around and shouting and roaring and having the crack and making it look like I'm not really doing much of anything at all. And it's only when you get the right manager.
Oh, absolutely. And if you get an inspirational manager in any industry, and I mean, that's the really hard part. When you're self-employed.
I didn't get a good manager until
it's
I was in my 40s.
hiring people who can be inspirational to work for your organization.
Yeah.
And be inspirational to other people. And in recruitment, we grew our company to 45 staff. So it was quite a lot of employees, which brought its own challenges,
Big
as you can
overhead.
imagine, when it was spread across 3 offices. But I grew to hate it, so I got out of it.
Managing people.
No, well, I didn't particularly, wasn't great at it, but I had some really good managers. But I just didn't like the recruitment industry. I really love the property industry, and I get a great buzz out of it. And I mean, it can bring its own challenges, as you're aware. We're in the middle of a judicial review at the moment, which is as big a challenge as I've ever had in my business life, but one that we're meeting pretty much head on. And
I can imagine you're meeting.
Oh yeah, we're meeting it head on. We are meeting it head on.
No better, man.
Be assured.
And come here, you've spent all these years, you know, the SFA, and you're a businessman since you're 24. So is there any one key takeaway that you've taken from those years that you've seen that has emerged as a pattern over the years that is a sort of a success signifier, that you know this business is going to work because it has?
Well, you never know a business is going to work, but I do know one word works. And would you believe it? I only watched this film yesterday evening and it really captures it. Have you ever seen The Founder?
The Founder.
Ray Kroc. He's not the founder at all, but he's the guy who made McDonald's.
Yes,
right?
We did watch that.
And it's a fascinating film.
Yeah.
Fascinating. But that one word is persistence. Persistence beats everything and everyone. And, you know, a friend of mine who's a great mate of mine and a great drinking buddy of mine compared me to Moss. Just keep going. Keep going. No matter what happens, keep going. And that, you know, when you're running a business, there are sleepless nights. You're alone. You do your best thinking at 4:30 in the morning, in my opinion, anyway.
I write them down on my phone because
The
the
bottom
only way I
line
can
is
get back to sleep.
worrying is a complete waste of time. So it has to be resourceful thinking at that hour of the morning, and you have to be creating solutions because you're awake when nobody else is awake. That means you're ahead of the posse. And if you think about it like that, it's a very positive way of interpreting it. Complete positivity, never accepting the negative interpretation of anything, and absolute belief is my humble opinion.
I love that. So you're talking about persistence and
It's
kind of
resistance
this
all the time.
dogged determination to keep going. I suppose there's a commitment there. I rely on this. I need this. I have to make a salary for myself. I have to pay the mortgage with this. I have to pay for the school and the diesel in the car.
A lot of folk pulling out of you.
Those are the things that are that drive you on. I think as well as a marketer and as a teller of stories and as a creator of story brands, I think purpose is really important.
Absolutely.
I think.
Well, the purpose drives it all.
Yeah.
I mean, if you don't, you can be persistent about something that's stupid.
Correct.
But there's no point being persistent. That'll backfire on you. I'm talking about having a proper goal, having something that's realizable, and then the other things kick.
And that you've fully spent the time, it's like therapy, that you've sat down and spent the time thinking about what your purpose is. Because you'd be surprised how many businesses that are out there that are trundling along and being quite successful and paying the wages.
Well, people are very busy.
Yeah.
You don't necessarily have to be very busy to have purpose and making a contribution. And I see an awful lot of busy fools running around, chasing their tails, killing themselves. I don't understand.
I'd be advocating that they nearly take a step back and stop and take stock of this and go, why do I get up in the morning?
Absolutely.
What is my purpose? What am I bringing to the table here that is uniquely different and valuable to the people I'm selling to?
Absolutely.
And I think a lot of businesses, as you say, they get busy.
Yeah, but they're busy fools.
And they don't have time to do that.
I spend way more time thinking than doing. I spend a lot of time golfing, and I don't think it's a waste of time. I think it's fantastic. In fact, I would say that it probably saved my life.
Do you think
10 years ago?
Do you think that golf, we'll go back to the saving life in a sec, do you think that golf almost gets you out of your head?
Completely.
Because it's such a psychological game.
Absolutely.
You need to get out of your head.
I have to get out. And I see my daughter, even though she wouldn't be the same as me in a lot of ways, I see golf has the potential for her to do exactly the same thing.
I mean, look, it's the same on a horse. It's the same on a horse, like to the exclusion of everything else. That focus, that there's nothing else that forces, like, I don't know what it is. I've never been diagnosed with anything, but
don't worry, my
I
kids
find
think
it hard.
I have loads of syndromes.
Yeah. I've never been diagnosed with anything, but I do find it hard to focus on a thing for a long period of time. When it comes to horses, no problem.
Well, and when it comes to golf, no problem. But I mean, if it was, I won't. I mean, when you told me today that I'll be here for 4 hours, you're killing me.
4 hours, load of pints.
Have a pint.
Grand.
We're drinking 0-0 for 4 hours.
Right. So one of the questions I had written down that we discussed was, who's your heroes? Who's AJ's heroes?
Well, and I'm glad, because I was saying to you before this, no one ever asks you that question. And then you automatically say, oh, my...
Noam Chomsky.
Yeah. Well, he wouldn't be my hero. But Thatcher or something, some Egypt like that. Or Chomsky. But I broke it down into family, business, and political. And then, and by the way, I looked at them all, and they're all nearly the same people, right? Even though they're totally different spheres. So my late uncle was my great hero. Helped me in business.
Mentor.
When he passed away, put a little ad in the back of the Irish Times. In memory of him, closed the office. In memory of friend, mentor, and uncle, in brackets, in that order. So he was a great guy. My kids, I find them heroic in terms of the future. I think that they're trying to create for themselves, their work ethic, their decency. They're good people. In terms of business heroes, I mean, I have unusual business heroes, but in international terms, Lucille Ball would be a hero of mine. She was the first founder, of a movie business. She owned her own production company. Anne Hershey.
The first female.
First female, yeah. Anne Hershey in Ireland, great friend of mine, but also an inspirational type figure for what she has achieved. I think
women.
Michael O'Leary.
Love it, yeah.
Not he's not a woman now, in fairness, no. But again,
even though sometimes
ballsy kind of style in terms of getting things done.
He has a real purpose. He has a real purpose when you hear him talking.
So internationally, then in business and in politics, Lyndon Johnson, even though he made an absolute bollocks of Vietnam, he done so much good and would have been one of America's greatest presidents only for Vietnam. But he achieved so much for a guy who started in the barren ground of Texas. Great guy. Roosevelt, total opposite in terms of wealth, born into wealth, but had to achieve enormous amount. And whatever we say in Ireland, Charlie Haughey was one of the best Taoiseachs the country ever had. Again, from 1987, when we were in the absolute doldrums.
When I was doing my junior cert, or the intercert as they called it back then, we were a third world country with Greece and Portugal.
And he lifted us out of it. His leadership and McSharry's leadership at the time lifted us out of it. There was purpose, there was leadership, there was conviction. And guess what? People buy into that stuff. They don't buy into this half-baked, trying to please everybody, populist crap that we're living through at the moment. By all the body politic.
What you're saying is there has to be someone with a vision and with the courage to drive that vision
And the balls.
And you can't be trying to please everyone.
You'll please no one. You know, in the last election, I'm still Fianna Fáil, even though it's very hard at the moment.
Yeah.
I looked at the last election, and you look at the policy section, and what was it? Let's not offend anyone. Let's not have policies, because it might offend anyone.
Really?
You should offend at least 30% of the population at any one time. Then at least you're standing for something.
Pick a lane.
Pick a lane.
Stand for something or you'll fall for everything.
Yeah. Oh, I like that.
Yeah, it's good, isn't it?
Yeah.
And I only came across that through, because I got into animal welfare and animal advocacy and stuff like that a good few years ago. And I heard somebody talking about that in the context of sport. And I applied it to my own thing. It was like, when I became aware of, you know, now we don't want to offend any farmers down in Mayo or anything like that.
Well, you won't offend any farmers down in Mayo.
When I became aware of animal agriculture and animal welfare legislation and a few of the things like that, common agricultural policy, I started to become politically aware within the animal
But you stand
sphere,
for something.
but outside the animal sphere, because everything's linked.
Yeah, but at least you stand for something.
Stand for something.
You know, you and I could be on polar opposites. We could have a discussion.
Yeah.
And agree to differ.
And it would be
by the
probably
way,
very interesting.
But also we'd have the ability not to start roaring at each other or
Oh, we
abusing
like
each other. We could, but we'd still actually at least attempt to see the other person's point of view.
Exactly.
The left in Irish society do not attempt to see anyone's point of view except their own dogged mantra of, which is complete failure throughout the world. Communism ended in Eastern Europe in the late 80s, but it's been reinvented in Ireland in 2023.
So in a communist world in Ireland, where would the money come from?
I have no idea.
Yeah.
Because they despise people or business people. They despise wealth creators.
Because it's been a long-term strategy to go back to Haughey and Gareth Fitzgerald and all the lads.
No, Gareth Fitzgerald made the bollocks things. He was a useless leader.
Really?
Stood for nothing.
Okay, who was good then for getting the foreign direct investment over to
Haughey.
Ireland? Haughey.
Reynolds,
yeah.
They were very, very good. I mean, if you go back, there's a really good podcast series at the moment of Irish Taoiseach. And we've been quite lucky. We've had some great, we've had Lamass, De Valera, even Cosgrave in the 70s, actually, in fairness to him, stood for something. Haughey, Reynolds.
Cosgrave, was he the one who took the VAT off children's shoes?
Oh, that was Bruton.
Oh, yeah.
He'd be irrelevant, really. Completely, actually.
Okay, so I'm not very good on all my old historical
No, but I mean, like,
there's
been some really good Fine Gael guys into Kenny who taught me as a kid now, but I mean, he ran a good show.
Yeah.
You know, he
didn't put a foot wrong.
He didn't put a foot wrong. He held the line. And in very challenging times as well. So you have to be fair. And I thought Cowan had a pretty raw deal, you know. Ahern had the peace process. Can never take that away from him. It was, you know, when you get an agreement with such a bunch of kind of
diverse
cats to try and herd. And that was an amazing achievement.
Herding
but then
cats.
I think we could have done better in other areas.
So there's been a number of them that have been part of this long-term strategy to pull Ireland up by the bootstraps.
Correct.
From being the third world country with Portugal and Greece to where we are now, where our GDP is...
Oh yeah, we're among one of the richest countries in the world. That didn't happen by accident.
By GDP.
And it was business people who bought into that concept.
And it was agriculture was the big kind of export up to that.
But farmers are huge. I mean, without farming, this country, there is no food. There is no milk. There is no beef. There's no vegetables. You know, we import a lot of vegetables. I mean, we're importing peat from Latvia at the moment, and we have shut down Bord na Móna You couldn't make this shit up. So we have enormous challenges in this country at the moment. The biggest one being housing and healthcare.
So what are the barriers then? Okay, so you used to be a developer. You
I
still
am.
are a developer. But back in the day, the word developer was kind of a dirty word.
Absolutely.
Why did it become a dirty word?
Well, it came for two really old-fashioned things, jealousy and greed, because people saw the lifestyles of developers, which was completely funded by irrational exuberance of financial institutions. And then the music stopped and it all collapsed.
The gravy train pulled into the station.
Over. It was a real shit show. And all the decisions that had been made both by developers and banks and government came home to roost in one of the great perfect storms of all time. And when you're caught up in it and you're caught up in the maelstrom of it, it's a really educating experience, because you learn an awful lot about yourself. You learn about resilience, you learn about persistence, you learn about all the things we've talked about already. You learn who your friends are, and the handful that are around you, you know they are with you for life then. That's why golf was so important, because going through that particular period, had I not been playing golf and gone out for a rotten, nasty 4-ball, well, I don't know how I'd have escaped. It was a fantastic escape.
I mean, we all have PTSD from those years.
Yeah, I think we all do. And I mean, we shared our chats before, and I compared it to walking along Baggot Street in the nice suit with the lovely briefcase, and a high-ace van pulls up beside you and pulls you in and takes you off to a lovely big industrial estate and beat the shite out of you. And you're in a boxing ring and you're left there, but they went every evening and you built yourself up and time went on, and eventually they came in and you kicked the shit out of them one day and you escaped. Probably a difficult analogy. But
resilience is the
a
point.
reasonable analogy in the sense that it made you very strong.
We grew muscle.
Made you very...
we became resilient.
And the most important thing to avoid that time was bitterness, because that would just destroy you. It would just destroy you as a human being if you become bitter. So you learn a lot about people. You learn a lot about friends. You learn a lot about family. You learn who's there, who's not there. You'd be surprised at who goes, and you'd be surprised at who stays, and you'd be surprised who comes into your life.
My animals stayed.
Not a nice way of calling me kids, but they stayed as well.
The horse was a big thing for me during those years. I couldn't afford to pay for livery. I had to put him out in the field with another horse. And there was no money for, posh liveries with indoor arenas or anything like that. So I used to go down and ride in the forest and in the fields. The farmers very kindly,
farmers were decent.
You can ride around the fields, no problem.
I grew up on a farm. Farmers are the most as decent of people as you'll meet.
It was the making of
good
me.
Ones that are.
It was the making of me though, as a rider and as a
and
not that I'm any good. I'm still really bad at riding. But the point is that I grew in confidence and this is an analogy. It's a similar analogy.
Exactly the same.
I was on my own. It was me and my horse on my own. Hail, rain or shine, we're hacking around the forest.
It's exactly the same.
And like. I was at the time. I remember I had my own business and it went in early 2010, and I remember reading David McWilliams' book, The Pope's Children, and I remember going, Gunther's money, Decklanders, blah 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 blah. That was really entertaining. That'll never happen though. The bubble will never burst.
Well, it did.
But it did.
Yeah.
And
by the way,
is there a bit of that now?
No, irrational exuberance. No, the bank's ratios. No, it's not happening. No, because the banks won't loan you money. So that's tough.
More governance now.
Way more governance and way more holding ratios and debt ratios. And we're paying way higher interest rates in Ireland right now compared to our European counterparts for our foray in the mid-2000s. But without developers, nothing will happen. They are the kind of the bread soda of the cake in terms of the land, labour, capital enterprise. Combine the whole thing together to create product. But there are the obstacles at the moment in terms of the planning system, in terms of taxation. You just could not imagine it.
Tell me a little bit about the barriers.
Well, if you look, there's an office called the Office of the Planning Regulator, which was introduced a few years ago, which is a new layer of bureaucracy. Now, yesterday, I was aware of a planning application that went in Skerries, for Lough and Skerries. This guy had been trying for years to get planning. He went for 12 houses. Nice infill development. Beside the train station. Sorry, can't get it. It's going to actually, we're at our numbers in Lough now for another 3 or 4 years. These are the numbers we have to work with.
Where did these numbers come from?
The Office of the Planning Regulator, in conjunction with the local council, they come up with that, and that's based on census levels of 2016, which are the wrong census levels to be operating from. It has led to land being dezoned in Kildare and Meath and Louth, land that's service land. So people can't build on it because it's been zoned back into agriculture. There's a housing crisis. A lot of these lands are near train stations. We have to, if you want to do the things that could change our property situation in the morning, you'd rezone all that land if it's serviced. Just rezone it immediately.
The infrastructure's already in place.
Exactly. I'd abolish the Office of the Planning Regulations. They're just a layer of bureaucracy. Transfer them into Bord Pleanála. Bord Pleanála is completely overworked.
They need staff.
They need about 150 new staff.
Yeah.
They need a section alone for legal. Because judicial reviews, I know I'm the victim of one, but just apart from me altogether, judicial reviews are now the latest way of just objecting. You just go to your council, you object. Then you stick to Bord Pleanála, object. Then you accept Bord Pleanála's decision, which after all is made by very talented people that are well educated in design. It has now been taken into the courts, and the courts are interpreting planning. Planning is not a thing for courts. The law is a rigid animal. It doesn't, whereas planning has to be flexible.
Nuance.
When we go, you've been in the industry, you know the crack. So that's a huge problem. Taxation. If you look at government policy now, they are getting a couple of things right. They've got this new cost rental scheme, which for young people starting out, fantastic. They've got a help to buy scheme. Really good, really smart. These are good initiatives. But overall, flip-flopping, lack of kind of clear messaging. You have one of the first acts Darragh O'Brien arrived in as Minister for Housing was to abolish co-living. Now, co-living, because the Schiller said co-living is the new tenements. Now, co-living works in Manchester, mid-range, Boston, Chicago. So we're the outlier now. And it's absolutely ideal for people coming into Ireland, short-term contracts, people going to college, short-term visits, la.
They're never in the place.
Correct.
They need to wash their clothes.
There's a really good one. Got through.
They want to sleep.
In Dunleary. You have it in one. So that was an awful...
And they don't want to share a 4-bedroom semi out in Tala with 7 other people.
Which is what will happen.
With 1 bathroom.
So that should be reintroduced immediately. It was a stupid decision.
They want their own little place, and they don't mind that it's, that it's got the shared kitchen or...
Absolutely. But they have huge facilities. They have cinemas, they have gyms, they have everything.
Yeah.
But I mean, 2 new latest incarnations of daftness were there was a build to rent regulations. They've merged them with ordinary building regs, right? So there's hundreds of planning applications in Bord Pleanála, which are based on the BTR regulations.
Yeah.
So if they fail, which some of them will, they have to go back to square one.
What were don't let me interrupt your train of thought now, because I know you have a few that you want to talk about, but what were the primary differences between the BTR regs and the buy
sizes
to sell, or the build to sell?
Sizes of rooms.
Size of the module.
Size of the module.
Yeah.
So the size of the module changes. The entire design changes.
Yes. You want to have as many similar...
It's consistency.
Yeah.
And the latest beautiful thing that they're talking about is a zoning tax, that if your land is rezoned, you pay a tax on it. So a farmer, for example, out in Lusk, who's growing his spuds and happy enough, and miraculously gets his land zoned, even though he didn't want it, is now going to get hit with land tax. It'll all lead to lack of supply. So
it's a land hoarding, it's supposed to be against land hoarding.
Well, they have one of those as well, but it's supposed to be against land hoarding. But it shouldn't interfere with people running their businesses.
No, especially not people growing spuds.
It's just stupid.
Love spuds.
It should be the absolute opposite.
Yes.
It should be 10% tax on land once against planning. If you're not going to develop on that land, we're going to give you a carrot.
Yeah.
Get rid of it. Someone else will build on it.
Yes.
And then, but you
So that'll
graduate.
speed up the
Yeah,
momentum.
but you also graduate that and say, look, you've got your planning now. Are you going to do something with it? If you're not going to do something with it, 10% for the first 18 months, 20% for the next, But eventually, after 5 years, we give you planning. You haven't used it. We're going to CPO your land at agricultural values and sell it to somebody at that value to build houses. That's some of it.
Okay, so that was taxation.
Taxation. The separate issue on
planning.
capital taxation is capital allowances. Like student accommodation and nursing homes are ideal vehicles to put capital allowances around tax allowances. So you do a tax-based scheme to get them built. And again, all you're doing each time, all of these actions lead to more supply. But it can be challenging to achieve all that. I mean, you look at down the country, and farmers' children can't build houses on their own land. I mean, if the services are there, you should be allowed to build a house on your bloody land. And
yeah, they're already hooked up to the power,
the
gas,
water is there.
The water.
So, and then if you look at passive housing, to me, if a house is a passive house, you should build a 1,500 square passive house and not even go for planning. Just as long as it's meets all the regs, carbon neutral, off you go. Because it wastes too much time and money and resources of councils.
AJ, tell me about Part 5.
Okay, well, Part 5 legislation has been there since the early 2000s. And what it was an attempt by government to integrate the social into housing estates, private housing estates. And it was 10%. But it's up now to 20% because, of course, we have to do more good. That's wonderful news.
We have to do more integrating.
Way more integrating. Well, instead of integrating, let's use that other 10% for something else. Let's use it for frontline workers, teachers, guards, nurses, firemen, that can buy these units at that fair price, but go a little bit further. These are the people we definitely need in our communities.
I love that idea.
And after 5 years, you give them back all the VAT, all the charges, everything that they would then. And that gives them a chance. First of all, it gives them a chance to get in and buy in the communities that they live and work in. Secondly, it offers that community an opportunity to retain them, because if they stay for 5 years, they're going to get another whip, which is the VAT and what back. But it also makes it affordable in every community within Ireland for these people who are vital for us.
They're doing the most important jobs in the community.
Well,
educating our children.
Well, educating our children, but also caring for our elderly.
Yeah.
And putting out fires. And maybe in some cases, the guards are just as important as the other three. But I think we have to be very careful that it's confined to frontline workers.
Yes.
Because the next thing you'd have unions saying, well, what about the department of such and such?
Yeah, not all civil servants are public servants.
It has to be real hardline frontline workers.
Also, that would send a really nice message.
That you're valued.
That they're valued.
Wouldn't it? Now, that is so much common sense that, but I mean, and it will not be taken up by the left because it will interfere with the 20% for the social housing who are their core voters.
I love that idea. We should start a campaign. We should start lobbying. We should start drafting a piece of legislation.
There are good people in Fianna Fáil, and there are good people, there's one or two in Fine Gael too.
My parents are both teachers.
There we, then you understand it.
They'd jump on board.
Oh, well, but I mean, you get a huge campaign. You'd have all the teachers, you'd have all the guards, you'd have all their parents, you'd have all their kids.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, it's common sense. It's not even
a solution.
It's not even about vote getting. It's about respect. It's about finding a mechanism to get these people settled in our community, that they're not commuting 30 or 40 miles. Very disillusioned if you're driving 20, 30, 40 miles. Very disillusioned if you're paying a whack of money. And we should encourage banks as well to give them favourable mortgage rates for the very same reason. Exactly the same reason.
I think we should also encourage banks. You know, when you find a property in Westmeath or Leitrim or Roscommon or Kildare and it needs to be done up.
Yeah.
right? It's falling into dereliction. It needs to be done up. When you go to borrow that money to buy that property, they won't give you money.
Well, there is a grant there now. There's a.
But
I
it's
think
for.
is it for conversion?
It's been left vacant for, I think it's.
Banks again. Banks and government are bureaucrats. You're talking about simplicity. The route I would go is through the credit unions. I'd allow credit unions to do mortgages. I'm very strict. I mean, we're not talking about free-for-alls here. We all had enough of that, but very strict.
I want to talk about bananas. I want to hear your reaction to bananas, which is the new NIMBYism. It's build absolutely nothing anywhere near anything.
Yeah, I think it sums up a certain element of Irish society who, I'm all right, Jack. Don't worry about the kids. Don't worry about the next generation. Don't worry about the workers. Don't worry about the people we need to come in and pick our mushrooms for us. Don't worry about those people at all. So, oh yeah, I mean, I think...
It's a generational thing though, isn't it? We've worked all our lives so that we can live in this leafy enclave.
It's not confined to that generation. It's across generations, and it's encouraged by elements within in politics. I mean,
where I live in Harold's Cross, it's kind of like Brooklyn. You know, you've got both ends of the spectrum. We have a hub for refugees and homeless people, and on one side,
but that's a piece of infrastructure that's absolutely
necessary. And then on the other side, we have a PRS scheme that's owned by a German fund, and all the people that live in there are working in LinkedIn and the foreign direct investment, and they're all paying like $3,000 a month for their rent. And it's like we have this representative spectrum of Irish society where I live.
And you know something?
I love that.
I certainly don't have any problem with it either.
Yeah.
But you have an element within our society who are bananas. That's very good. I like bananas. And I mean, we have encountered them all over the country. It's not confined to Dublin in any way, shape or form. Generally, oil of euro cures it. Massaged in properly. And on the occasion when it doesn't cure it either, but that they're generally
the emollient is money.
But there's always money is involved. You
Follow
can be assured, no matter what deal has ever been done on this planet, someone somewhere is in it for the money only.